Hi, everyone. This is Rev Kymmi. Thank you so much for joining us.
And I'm Dr. G, and we're here with a new podcast for you.
Did you guys ever watch Dexter?
Oh, yeah, I did. I always, I've saw it before and just kind of blew it off, and it didn't really catch my interest. But then I watched one episode with you, and it's like, as a forensic victimologist and a criminologist, it really caught my interest, and lo and behold, we ended up binging and watching both series, the old one and the new one.
I introduced you to the series, but you know who introduced me to it? My children.
Oh.
They were teenagers, older, 17 years old or so. Yeah. But otherwise, I wouldn't have watched that. But it was really popular, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
but now we've got
thinking about Dexter.
Not fiction, but some real cases, right?
Well, actually, it's a real serial killer who resembles Dexter.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know the term dark passenger, but within the TV series Dexter, they reference his dark passenger to be his serial killer side that he hides very well from his family and friends. And that mirrors this serial killer on the I-70 case that we're going to discuss.
Yep. That dark passenger. It's interesting that, that comes up now. Like in our podcast, just this afternoon, we were watching the news, you remember, and they were talking about a well-known famous singer was referring to the alter ego. And it was the alter ego that went up on stage and did all this stuff for him or her. And, it makes you wonder, just especially when we look at this guy, how many... I remember reading, years ago when I was working on my master's, I came across an article where the FBI had said that at any given moment, 50 serial killers were running amok in the U.S., and, of course, they
just
did...
Just 50?
Oh, yeah, just 50. Just 50. That's really a statement there. I remember when I was working on the smiley face stuff, the smiley face serial killer.
Yeah, if you guys don't know, Dr. G was on, initially on Oxygen Channel, Smiley Face Killers, The Hunt for Justice. Yep. It's a reality series.
With Kevin and Anthony and Mike.
Yeah, they're New York homicide detectives.
Yeah.
And so they did a 6 episode,
6 episodes.
Not the movie. Yeah. You can now watch it on Amazon Prime Video.
Real world cases, yeah. So I was researching that, and we were pretty darn sure that the very first victim, at least with this network we're working with, was in New Orleans. And so I was looking, and I found that day in my search, and so this is back in 2006, there were 3 serial killers in the state of Louisiana on the loose at the moment, and each was very distinct in the victims that they were choosing. I wish I could go back and find out whether or not any of them were captured, detected, apprehended, and arrested and sentenced and so forth. But there's 3 at the same time in one state. It is quite a phenomenon. The FBI actually, a lot of folks don't know this, they have a task force that they've established for truck driver interstate serial killing, where they pick them up in one state, take them several states over, and dispose of the body. So it really makes you wonder just how many serial killers are loose nowadays. And the scary part, folks, is this dark passenger. When you look at all the serial killers, those of you who are really into this phenomenon, you look online, it could be your neighbor. It could be your brother or sister.
That reminds me, just to name a few, before I read the obituary to this person.
Yeah.
His name is Harry, okay? I'm going to read his obituary to prove to you guys. If you don't know, I'm a litigation and trial paralegal in civil law in California and other states. but I've worked among Robert Shapiro, the attorney who handled the O.J. Simpson criminal case, Dream Team, as well as with Ken Starr, Monica Lewinsky case, and some others. You could go to my LinkedIn, found as Kymmi, Kymmi, Bloomberg, BLOOMBRG, and you could read about me. I don't want to say anything more than that. But I'm going to prove to you guys how well this guy was hiding his dark passenger.
Oh, yeah, no. Go ahead.
You want me to go ahead and read it now?
Read his old bit. This is...
Okay. It's brief, though. It's brief, but it says enough.
If you knew this guy, you'd
before
go buy
we
ice
tell
cream
you what
from
he's
him.
done,
It's crazy.
Before we tell you the killings that he has done, but I want to show you how he has deceived his family and friends so well, hiding the dark passenger. He died prior to the police discovering that he is the I-65 killer. And so his obituary says, Harry, a man with many friends who loved his straight-up attitude and his willingness to help anyone. His spirit will live on in many by good deeds he offered. As an employee of the Canadian Pacific Railroad, providing public safety for 30 years, he retired February 2010. Harry enjoyed organic gardening, selling his organic produce to local farmers market, traveling, reading, wordsmithing, avid college sports fan, and selecting winning thoroughbred horses.
Yeah. And he was married, and we'll get into that.
He sounds like a lovely person, doesn't he?
A couple times. And... you know, when you see pictures of him, it's like it's the guy you'd run into at Walmart, you know, or Costco or any of those places on the street.
But
at
he's
a
local
local coffee shop. You'd probably sit down. I remember when I worked construction, I probably sat next to guys just like him and had a piece of pie and a cup of coffee for breakfast, you know. It's just crazy. So anyway...
Sidebar.
That's the way he's described. Yeah.
Sidebar. This is really creepy. We've seen this studied online. I don't know if you guys have heard it. I mean, I'm assuming that a good chunk of you are in law enforcement or in the alternative, just love true crime followers. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys have seen this study. Google it. Serial killers fall into certain, not that I believe in the zodiac or horoscopes, but there is a pattern here consistent. This man, serial killer, was born December 9th. Now he fits in the pattern. There are only a few horoscopes that coincide constantly with serial killers. There's like, I forget, is there 5 or 4 constant, like Pisces, Sagittarius, Gemini is one, and a few others. But this guy is born December 9th. He falls into the category 2, Dr. G. He's a Sagittarius.
Yeah.
Isn't that creepy? It is consistent. Whenever we run into a serial killer, we look at his date of birth, and it does fall into the same study. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, Google it. You'll find it. Serial killers horoscopes. And they're constant. There's like 4 or 5 of them. I can't believe this guy actually falls out. I did that live with you guys. I've never checked him out. His date of birth. Yeah. And he coincides as well with the other known serial killers. So
pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. So do you want to give them the background as to what this case is about?
Yeah. Well, I'm the criminologist, the forensic victimologist, you know, PhD type, you know. But when looking at different social media, without naming names and so forth, There's some comments out there about him being a spree killer or a serial killer. And I think where the spree comes from in some cases, they're talking going from city to city, X number of days. But,
I think they're giving an ill definition when they're using the word spree killer. That's not true to the definition, is it, Dr. G?
Yeah, if you, because we're focusing on
you guys don't know, but you're going to learn some things about criminal justice.
I-70 killer, but you have, mass killings, mass shootings, mass stabbings, or whatever, like mass driving a truck through the crowd, like in Nice, France, on Bastille
What
Day.
about last year? There was a guy in Tennessee. He was live on Facebook and doing spree killings.
Now, that's spree. Literally,
that's the real definition of spree killing.
It might take you a couple days, but let's say you have to go. I'm thinking of the guy who killed Versace. Going through airport security and getting to the next town and finding your victim and killing him and then going to the next. That would be spree. And when we show you later on, you'll see the connection here. If you kill a bunch of people, I remember a case in Skokie, Illinois. I think it was Skokie. An individual was literally driving down the street looking for male Jewish members that had the black hat and the little tassels.
So if they
I'm not
fit
Jewish,
the description, they get killed.
And he'd shoot him and kill him, and go to the next one and go to the next one.
That's crazy.
Sometimes it may require going from one city to the next. Like the DC snipers, those two guys. Is that spree or is that serial? There was some time in between. They literally were going from crime scene to crime scene, from homicide scene to homicide scene. But generally speaking, when you have a serial killer, there's two aspects to it. There is some time in between. They call that the cooling off period. And so the best way to think of it is substance abuse. You get a high, and then you ride the wave, and then you come down, and then you go find your dealer, and you get another fix, and up you go. And
now,
you
don't
ride
serial
the wave.
killers,
yep,
killers of any sort, don't they get a high from what they do?
Yeah, and that's generally sexual, but not all. I
think they get a high from murdering people.
That case. Now here's the deal, folks. They're either going to be closer and closer together as time goes on, and the MO, the modus operandi, the method of operation, or the manner by which they do their killing, remains the same, but the time period between it becomes less. The other option is that the time period can stay about the same, but the level of violence increases. I remember I worked on a case in Reno, and the killer started out by an assault, and then it was a sexual assault, right there on the spot. Then the next one was an abduction and an assault, and of course he was releasing his victims. And then the next one was abduction, beating, and assault, and it went on from there. And I told him, I said, the next one is either going to be a murder, most likely. And then after that, you're going to see it increase because the time period was not getting shorter. I said the next one is going to be an abduction, a sexual assault, and then likely dismemberment. Of course, murder is involved, and so forth. And that's exactly what happened. The fourth victim was terrible. And then it quit. It just up and quit. And that's important, the story we're going to tell you now. It just up and quit.
You want to know why? Life gets in the way for them. Because they're people just like us.
Yeah, like Green River Killer and BTK.
Life gets in the way. Dennis Rader, BTK.
And
he had children, and he stopped during that time.
And with that killer in Reno, it quit. And I told him, I said, you need to start looking around at other cities nearby. He didn't quit. Either he got arrested, which sometimes causes the stop, and that's part of life getting in the way, got arrested for something else, or he moved to another city. And in fact, he did move to another city in that case. They did eventually catch him. And it also demonstrated that there's no randomness in crime. the body was found within sight of a former female romantic friend of his who had jilted him, so he put the last victim right literally in sight so she could see it. And I will talk about randomness of crime here in a second as well. But this guy, we have 5 dates and 6 victims. And they're between 1 and at the second site there were two people murdered. So you have 3 days between the first and second, and then 16 days between the second and third. Now, is there such a long period because he got a super fix from murdering 2 people? And then it goes to 4 after that.
Do you think that was planned, Dr. G?
No.
To kill 2 at
once?
once?
I think he showed up and it was like a 2 for 4.
Unfortunate situation.
Yeah. And, but is that spree or is it serial? Well, there's some time in between. I think
that's serial.
I think it'd be defined as serial.
Yep.
So,
that's a Dexter situation.
Yeah. So before we get into the details of this and what we were talking about with interrupted with life changes, I would like you, Kymmi, to share with our listeners your prophetic analysis and what God revealed to you and what you shared with law enforcement.
Okay, so like I said, guys, I'm a litigation and trial paralegal. These are cases for movie stars and known corporations like Apple, defending them in trial, etc. With, one case I worked on, coincidentally, headset that I worship the Lord with, Beats, Beats.
Yep.
Beats is owned by Apple.
Yeah, we use them every morning to do praise and worship.
Yeah, I do praise and worship with them, and it's so ironic that I defended them that in a civil trial, and we won, of course. Yeah. But anyway, it is something that I do.
Yeah, this was quite surprising. I remember when you first mentioned this to me, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, I hadn't even heard about it. I was so wrapped up in my teaching stuff and everything else that I don't keep track of it. And even though I'm involved in serial killer stuff, I had never heard of this. And of course, when you first told me about it, we hadn't done any research online regarding this. I was absolutely in the dark, and a lot has happened.
Before I share, like you were saying, my prophetic analysis, I just want to say that, I do like working on serial killer cases, unsolved cases, which I don't want to go into reasons why, but so I found this article online, and it was about a whole bunch of cases that are unsolved, serial killer cases. So I was drawn to this particular one. I'm like, I-70, what is this about? I never heard about it. Had you, Dr. G? No, we'd never heard of it. So, so I went into, I actually wrote the investigator. They do have a team, a task force of 5 or 6 states, okay, of law enforcement, police chiefs, and FBI and stuff like that. So I found out who the lead is, and I wrote the lead, and he's the St. Charles Police Department. He's the police chief.
Yep.
Ray. We'll just call him Ray because I'm just down to earth. And so I wrote him and told him who I was, and I have a law enforcement reference who is a commander of a detectives division in Los Angeles, and I cannot say which law enforcement agency, but it is large, and he, God bless him, is my reference for all law enforcement throughout the country or internationally. So I CC'd, my law enforcement reference, and I told him, the police chief, who I was, and that I was going to adopt their case and use my prophetic gifts, which I've done on many other cases successfully. And so I gave him an opportunity, being that I'm in law, civil law. I want to give him an opportunity, a heads up on what I'm about to do. And I'm going to submit to him an email of the profiling of the killer. And so I give him an opportunity to object to receiving any information from me. I received no email reply from him stating that he wasn't interested. So after waiting a few days, I went ahead and went into praise and worship. And in fact, you know what? I was working on a different case too. I was distracted working another case. Was it a police chief or a sheriff down in Minnesota on Madeline Kingsbury's case?
Oh, yeah.
He was a sweet guy. They were nice. He was nice.
Yeah,
what a horrible...
Winona. Yeah.
But they were really sweet, the police there.
Yeah.
And so I was in the midst of helping them, and that was accurate to the T, yet again, because I'm not claiming the fame here. This is a prophetic gift. This is a gift from the Holy Spirit, from God. And the information is always accurate. So anyway, so I never heard from this particular police chief objecting to me jumping into his case and giving my 2 cents. And so I gave him an email, a working email of my notes, which I'm not going to reiterate here. But within this particular email, there are references to that email. Okay?
Yeah.
So this is 6 months ago, about 6 months ago. I wrote Police Chief Ray of St. Charles, Missouri. Yeah. And I always CC my law enforcement reference, just in case he's called. He knows what I said to these people, and on this particular case, just in case he's called. He has a heads up. So this is June 11th, 2023 at 6:07 p.m. And I said identification of the I-70 killer and overall prophetic analysis of the I-70 serial killer. Now, this is a lot of information, but if you guys listen, it's important, and it actually matches the I-65 killer. Dear Chief.
Can I interrupt her?
Yeah, of course.
As she reads this now, keep in mind what we said about the dark passenger and being able to live amongst everybody. I mean, you talk about wolves in sheep's clothing, walking among the herd of sheep. Here we go.
Yeah, he was really good. I mean, if you think about it, the police never knew who the I-65 killer was until they ran the DNA to discover who it was. Yeah. And by that point, Harry was dead already.
Yeah.
In 2013. And when did they solve this? The I-65 discovered who he was. I think in 2022 or 2023.
Yeah.
I don't remember which, guys, sorry.
Some DNA, but that was the 65. We're talking about the I-70 killer.
Yeah. Okay, so dear Chief and investigators, because remember, they have a team of 5 or 6 states in the FBI.
So ATF is in there too.
So I asked him to please share this with everyone.
ATFE, but
So I asked him.
Pedantic there.
Wait a minute, what does that stand for?
Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Everybody forgets that.
Wow.
But in the old days, it was just ATF. Everybody calls it ATF, but it's bad.
So why do you think they were involved, Dr. G?
Well, the FBI makes sense.
No, we know I'm not talking about FBI.
State borders, but the only thing I can think of is ATF. I mean, it's not like he's got explosives or DEA would be there if it was drugs. So ATF is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. It's got to be the fact that it's he's using a handgun for most of the killings. That's the only thing, and it crosses state lines. So that makes it federal.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. Well, I can't think of anything.
Yeah, bad
I'm in civil law.
So it's called a BAT F instead of ATF.
I could tell you about litigation. Okay. So based on my prior, here we go. Here's the email, guys. based on my prior, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to read the working notes, but I do reference it in here, okay, the points. Based on my prior working notes, details of the suspect that I sent to investigators on June 9, 2023, directly via email to Police Chief at St. Charles Police Department, I have concluded the following about your unsolved case, aka I-70 killer. I hereby reveal to investigators who I believe is the identity of the I-70 killer and why. This individual is a perfect match to my prophetic information. I knew nothing about the case except very minimal intentionally not to influence me, that I shared with the investigators, as well as to the eyewitness store owner, Tim Hickman. I watched Mr. Hickman's video interview available online, and he stated that the suspect had one lazy eye or two lazy eyes, which this man does. And let me just say that when I worked this case at the very beginning, I went into praise and worship. I asked the Lord about it. I wrote down a whole bunch of notes, and I knew absolutely really nothing about this case. But afterwards, I started looking online and getting a feel, of who it could be, the suspects that they had. I discovered the I-65 killer, and I started looking into him. I felt pulled to him. I started to dissect him. What does he do for a living, etc. Everything about him, his looks, looking at his photo, reading him, so to speak, and what God was showing me about him, and I felt he was a match. That the I-65 killer that they recently discovered is also the I-70. So I'm not done reading this yet, but go ahead.
I'm going to interject here. Lazy eye is medically known as amblyopia, however you want to pronounce that. And it can be a host of different ways. One eye looking out, one eye looking in, or both looking in or both looking out, or, one slightly looking up or down or something like that. But the point is, both eyes are not looking in the same direction at the same time. And it's really, I'm not going to get into it, but how the brain works to filter all that out. But it only occurs in 2 to 3% of the population in the United States.
So the probability
it's pretty
of two
rare.
Killers looking the same with a lazy eye is very rare.
It's pretty rare, yeah.
So, so what I'm doing is checking out suspects and ruling them out. And remember, I'm prophetic. I'm not only a litigation trial paralegal, which I compare. I'm very skeptical. I need my evidence. I just don't just believe anything. I need to compare my prophetic notes against evidence, and it needs to make sense. I'm not just going to believe anything. And this cross-references very nicely against also dissecting the timeline and the location and his personal events that coincide as well, which we'll share in a bit.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's a perfect match.
Yeah, it fits.
He
right
has to be.
I always tell my students there's no such thing as random crime, and boy, this.
Yeah, we're both using our legal skills, but I'm also using my prophetic gifts.
Okay.
So
please
per
read
here,
on.
okay, continue on with this email. As per my working notes below, I stated that he lived as a redneck type individual. Now remember, I'm from the city, L.A., right?
Yeah.
City girl, I worked downtown L.A., Century City at law firms.
Yeah.
So this is my perspective. To me, he's a redneck
Yeah.
type individual. Property is out on its own, secluded. Owns his own house that is about 2 bedrooms. He is a blue-collar worker. This is all from God, guys.
Yep.
This is
and
nothing.
Keep in mind the term redneck
There's no
comes
profile.
from working outdoors in the sun.
There's no profile on this guy anywhere, right? No one knows, not even the cops.
At this point.
So this is God's profile that he's telling me.
Yeah.
He tells me he owns his house, that it's a 2 bedrooms or so. He is a blue-collar worker who is great with tools. God kept showing me with tools. I said when he worked, he was isolated. I said he works or used to work This individual is retired from his blue-collar position with Canadian Pacific Railroad. He worked with railroad tools his entire life.
That's pretty specific.
Now, I didn't find that until recently to get my affirmation, which is 6 months later, people. Yeah. It was nowhere written.
Think about it.
But we found it in his, you know where we found it? In a rare obituary.
Santa Fe, Kansas City,
It said that he was in charge.
And
it said that he was in charge of the safety of actually the railroad itself. Yeah. So he was out probably with tools working the railroad.
Track inspection and maintenance, yeah.
Yeah, literally, guys. Okay, I believe that this individual traveled for the railroad or for his hobbies, for work, thus why the I-70 killings are spread out throughout many states in short distance of time. Another thing I just want to insert sidebar here is that I did research to find out there was the first killing in Indiana, which is the connection between the I-65 and the I-70 routes. So that would make sense to drop in to Indiana and do a killing. And when I do this work, I get into the mindset of a criminal. Okay? That's why it makes sense. Yeah. Right?
And all the victims we were talking about were shot with except the first one was a .38 caliber. All the rest were a .22 caliber.
So then the next is, guys, he kills in Wichita, Kansas. But why is he jumping from Indiana to all the way over there to Kansas?
Yeah.
I believe, as I've told the police, it's because of the fact that his headquarters for the railroad company is in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So it's right there.
Kansas City Southern.
Okay. So then, let's see, where was I?
Which, by the way, was acquired and merged with Canadian Pacific.
Yeah. All victims have brown hair, female, and shot with a gun. I believe he never stopped, as it appears. I believe he switched guns due to the fact that law enforcement released through the media that ballistic ties all 6 murders. Now, they released that to the public after the last killing, right?
That is true. According to the television interview that we saw just earlier tonight, I didn't know this, an exact date, after the Raytown murder, which was May 7th, 1992, after releasing the information that the cases were connected by ballistics and the gun to the media, those murders stopped. They could be tied ballistically.
And we'll tell you why we believe.
All the guns.
We'll tell you why in a bit, why we believe that the murders begun and the murders stopped.
Yeah.
Okay? In a bit. But back to this email to law enforcement, to the lead in charge of the task force for the I-70 killer. Now, I said surprisingly, prophetically, this is what the Lord showed me. And boy, did that match the truth. I said prophetically that his neighbors would describe him as surprisingly a nice guy. But remember, that is due to the fact that he is super good at hiding his, quote, dark passenger, as we referenced for the TV show Dexter. I read online today that a man I think is responsible. His neighbors described him exactly as that. But in truth, who is far, very far from a nice and friendly man.
Yep.
But boy, did he deceive many. I remember my prophetic notes that I saw, quote, saw, him boiling food or whatever it was. I saw him doing like canning. Now, what I discovered, remember, is that it is my understanding that the man I believe is the I-70 killer sold items or food out at the farmer's market. Did he can items, sell them at the farmer's market? So that's what I was most likely seeing. I said he was simple-minded, not intelligent, and uneducated. My suspect fits that description. As I look at your suspect posters, the various versions drawn My suspect does fit the sketches perfectly, doesn't he, Dr. J?
Oh yeah, it's just phenomenal.
We will put it as our photo for this episode so you guys can see how well he matches up. His real picture to the sketch.
The artist's rendering of the I-70 killer with this guy who has, been identified as the I-65 killer. It's like, holy cow. I mean, because you can change your appearance just in a photo for a lineup. Not that I want to give a clue to anybody being arrested, but just raise your head just a little bit so you lose that turkey waddle if you're an old man like me, under your neck, or take some wrinkles out of your face, and it makes your nose, it even changes the perspective of your nose and your jawline and everything. But if you look at the pictures of the composite drawings of the suspects in these two cases, along with this guy, it's like, it's really uncanny. It's really uncanny.
Yeah. So, okay, more with this email. I believe that the I-70 killer is Harry Edward Greenwell. He's deceased 2013, who is the DNA-connected I-65 killer. Yeah. Now, that's another thing, sidebar, that the Lord showed me. They have fingerprints or partial fingerprints or DNA. No, and DNA. It was not and/or. And we read that tonight. We find our evidence that they do have fingerprint evidence with DNA.
Yeah.
On this case, the I-70.
DNA.
Yeah.
Yep.
We found evidence that was right, what the Lord told me. So he is unfortunately at this point evolving as a killer. But one would not think that to stop doing an act, which is rape with the killings, as evolving, but it is.
Oh, it makes sense too, criminologically.
It does. Why?
Yeah, and victimologically.
Why?
Well, we've spilled the beans, so to speak, already. But we're looking at the relationship between the evidence of the I-65 killers, the MO, modus operandi, the method of operation, and the I-70 killer. And it's not connected because there says, they're two different MOs.
But everything matches.
Yeah.
We got the timeline matches. We got the interstate killing matches.
Yeah.
Who else is qualified to do such murders?
Yeah, but you know what?
The I-65. Remember, he was just right there.
Killers aren't
right
stupid,
there.
And when you plug it into the timeline of his life, it makes perfect sense. So you have an individual who's killing using one style, and then something happens, and he takes a break, and he comes back, and he does.
And we'll tell you why he took a break.
He uses another style, sort of. Actually, the only difference was that he switched from one gun to the other. And then the police release the information about the gun and
that it's a match for
the
all
jeweler's
victims.
Rouge and stuff like that came into play later on. And he obviously quit using that gun, and those murders on I-70 stopped.
He just changed up his mojo.
Theoretically. Do they change? Oh, yeah. Killers aren't stupid. There are some folks out there, I mean, you guys are really into this and go look around, who read up and do their study, do their research. I mean, they make really good students in one of my classes. And they decide they want to be famous and become famous as a serial killer. And they intentionally go out and they try to create the lack of patterns, and they switch up their MOs, and they change their appearance. But eventually they get caught in that, most of them.
For instance,
I should
Brian
say some of
Kohberger.
them, not even most of them, but
for instance, Brian Kohberger
that's
in
part of this,
Idaho.
Yeah, scary thought. How many are really out there that know how to do this? And
I mean,
change
if
all
you think about it, just sidebar again, we have, he's really good at hiding his true identity, hiding behind a wife. I'm married, and I have children, and I'm a great guy, and I work in the yard. I do gardening. That's BTK, is it not? The Dennis Radar.
Oh, yeah.
It's also the new Long Island serial killer.
Yeah, architect. Yep.
Yep. I hide behind what? I've got a wife and children or child.
Yeah.
I'm just a normal guy.
Yeah. So share with us some more of this.
Okay, so back to the email. He is unfortunately at this point evolving as a killer. But one would not think that to stop doing an act, rape, as I was saying before, is evolving, but it is. He used to combine rape with his murders, but he learned, as did BTK, Dennis Rader, that he could not control his victims. So as you know, the I-65 killer, Greenwell's last victim, survived by stabbing, a knife, all proceeding with guns. Something had to have gone terribly wrong for him. He could not control his victim, to have not used a gun, but had to have used a knife. As a result of his botched killing, he switched up his game from the I-65 to the I-70 and learned raping was too risky. Therefore, they ended. He did continue on with choosing off main highway, a storefront of some sort. Motels are like storefronts, too. Easy to get in and get out, right off a main highway. Greenwell, before and at the time of his death, lived in a secluded house, 2 to 3 bedrooms that he owned away from others, exactly as I had prophetically told police. His address is, I know his address, but I won't say it. It's in New Albin, Iowa. I do background searches for attorneys to find people on lawsuits. So I did that on Greenwell. Greenwell has the 1 or 2 lazy eyes as per eyewitnesses. I scoured online for eyewitnesses, listened to their testimonies, and one, as I do in law and civil, I work trial. I'm a trial specialist. And so I listened to the testimony on video that was available online with Tim Hickman, a business owner to a video store. He is an eyewitness to the serial killer, okay, the I-70. I watched Hickman's interview online, and he said the suspect had 1 or 2 lazy eyes. This is not a common thing that we have lazy eyes. You know, I mean, I can't even think of anybody that I knew who had lazy eyes. It's that not uncommon. Do you remember anyone in your life that you normally had contact with who had a lazy eye, Dr. G? Seriously.
Well, I've
on a normal day-to-day basis.
No,
in your life.
I've
Me
been
either.
in, like 42 of the states and all over Europe, and I can only think of one person I knew who had a lazy eye.
Okay, so it's rare. Harry Edward Greenwell is the man I believe to be the I-70 killer, as well as the declared by law enforcement in 2022. Oh, that's when it was, when they solved it in 2022 via DNA as the I-65 killer. The victims' appearances are a match also between the I-65 and I-70. Such females, excluding one accidental killing of a man mistaken for a female, which I don't believe is true anymore after doing research, by the way. We have information about that in a bit, about the victim, Michael McCohen, and they all have brown hair, including the male. I believe this killer has some kind of psychological issue with a female with brown hair in his past that he is trying to deal with emotionally by these killings. He is a match, which we'll go into, that we believe we know what sparked him to go into this killing. He is a match to the prophetic information, real-world information about the suspect, as well as match as to the 1 to 2 lazy eyes per eyewitnesses. Okay. I'm reading the rest of it. Okay, I'm just saying God bless you. We're praying for you guys, to solve this case. Remember, this is the email that I sent to the lead on the I-70 law enforcement task force.
Now, those of you in the statistics, think about this. Lazy eye is about 3% of the population, which makes it pretty rare. And if depending upon what website you go to, but generally speaking, green eyes are rare. They're only in 9% of the American population and 2% worldwide. Okay, now I'm pretty sure I could figure this out if I did some more research. I mean, I do have my PhD, so I had to take some stats classes. But it doesn't take a statistician or a rocket scientist to think how many people have green eyes and a lazy eye and of a certain height and so forth. I mean, the probability of those two characteristics being present in any one individual repeatedly
say something, Dr.
has got to be like a full, a blue moon.
Dr. G, can I say something?
Sure.
Well, not only those things, but who can raise their hand and say, I'm qualified to do those crimes? I don't have it under my belt. Do you? No. I-65 killer has it under his belt. It's just the next interstate over. The timeline connects. The highway, the interstate, I should say, connects, literally.
Yeah.
But he also has the experience for the job, so to speak. I mean, if you think about it, common sense, logic, apply logic. Who is doing crimes at that caliber? Oh, the I-65 killer. Just right there.
Yeah.
He's qualified for the job.
And it fits from a scientific perspective, a crime mapping perspective.
Let me tell you guys something creepy I found. Dr. G's not impressed so much, but I am. I did backgrounds. I wanted to find connections to the killer, to the victims. And I did my background checks that I do for the lawyers, the attorneys. You're never going to believe what I found. I think it's a big deal. Dr. G's like, well, I don't know. So get this. So Harry, who I believe is the I-70 killer, he has his roots out of Louisville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Guess who else does? He doesn't have his roots there, but he was planted there for X amount of years. It's victim number 4, Michael McCowan. He was in Louisville, Kentucky for X amount of years. And can you believe the 2 addresses between those 2 men? Guess how many minutes away they are from one another? 15 minutes. They lived 15 minutes from each other. He's the only male. Could it be that he knew him? That something went awry? That he went and he killed him? And that's why he's the only male?
Yeah, it's...
People are suspect. They're saying, it's because he had long hair. He looked like a girl. He's mistaken. No, he wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
His sisters testify. We found the testimonies online that he had given up the long hair a long time ago.
Yeah, both his sisters.
He had short hair at the time.
We just found that tonight. Yeah.
Right. But we have conflicting testimonies because we heard that it's allegated from the police that he was confused for being a female. So didn't they see his body and his hair?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we're finding testimony online from the sister that no, he gave up long hair a long time ago. So we don't know what the truth is, but we're finding conflicting information. But I found that they lived 15 minutes apart.
Yeah, and you can't
for a certain duration of time.
By news articles. I mean,
we don't know.
What are the odds that
I would think that the police know from
newspaper
seeing the
in
body.
England actually showed up in the United States to go check this out. I highly doubt that.
It's hard to know, so we can't make a conclusion. inconclusive.
Yeah, but I do agree, and I always tell my students this. There is no such thing as random crime. In order for it to be random, every member of the target population has to become part of a sample population eventually. And the selection from that final sample population has to be random. And I cannot victimize you, Kymmi.
Yeah, you can.
Until our paths either cross on the internet via some social
For
media
instance,
or
Brian
whatever.
Koberger case.
Yeah. Or physically. And this is physical. So I can't punch you in the face until we meet. And so, for me, the jury's still out on that one. 15 minutes
I think it's
apart.
significant. I reported it to the police and gave it to them.
But for you,
if
true
they didn't
crime
already
buffs
see
out
that.
there, yeah, for you true
If they
crime
didn't
buffs
already
out
know
there,
that
check this one
information.
out. I don't remember who it was. I should have been taking notes. But Elizabethtown is this little dinky town just south of Louisville. And from what I recall, I think it was Harry's mother or something like that, and one of the victims had both spent time in that town.
Which town?
Elizabethtown, Kentucky.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So did Harry run into that victim while visiting his mother or something? See, I remember a case.
Well, that's why I told the police so they could dig into it.
Yeah,
you know?
and this comes back to what I was
They
talking
need to
about
check it out
before.
and see if there's any
the
connection.
Reno killer disposed of one of the bodies of the Reno killers within eyesight of the apartment where his former girlfriend lived, who jilted him. Was that his way of getting back at her? So
you never know.
This connection in Louisville, the connection
that's why I saw
in
the connection,
yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh, I'm telling."
I
wrote the police chief and told him.
I think the police need to really thoroughly investigate where each and every one of these victims lived, and when they lived there, in comparison to when this guy not only lived there, but when
you never know if someone's going to harbor a lot of resentment
when he worked there
and get vengeance 20 years later.
And this goes back to crime mapping again. When we look at these
know.
two serial homicide cases, 65 and 70, they are both along the route of the Canadian Pacific, Kansas City Southern routes. Anybody who knows their history knows that interstate highways and state highways were built next to or near railroad lines that were put in years ago. And this guy worked for the railroad.
You know what, Dr. G? I'm serious. I would really like to talk to that railroad company and ask them how they feel about the fact that he worked for them for 30 years and he's killing along their railroad. I mean, literally killing on his lunch hour, most likely, or after work.
Yeah.
Hey, have a great night. Okay.
Yeah, supposedly
I'm going to have a great night.
I'm
going to go kill someone.
He worked in maintenance.
I mean,
so whether he was a track inspector,
God told me he worked
repairman,
isolated, and boy, did he.
That's probably a track inspector, then, not maintenance.
Yeah. Well, no,
there
that's
should
what
be
it
a
said.
record of which inspections he signed off on, and I think they should cross-reference those with these killings, and I think they'll find that he was in the vicinity.
Oh my gosh, I would subpoena the work records.
They'll find
his attendance, everything.
He was, near Raytown.
You know what we
when
found?
That homicide occurred.
Talking about looking at timelines, because I would subpoena, I really would in an instant. I'd get my attorney to sign it real fast. The guys I work for. Let's subpoena this.
Yeah,
let's
I'd
check
see
this out.
Every piece of paper he ever had.
I want to see his attendance, what he was doing on those days, where he was at.
Yeah.
No doubt it'll coincide.
That
we
brings
need
me
to share.
Thing.
Hold on, we need to share with them and show them how we found on the timeline. I found it. What events occurred, guys, before he started killing, and when he stopped killing, paused for a time. And since I'm the one who found it, I'm going to tell them.
Well, let me share one thing real quick. because this goes back to crime mapping again. We talk about the period when these were occurring, the ones that we know of, between 87 and 92. And, I worked for 10 years, essentially, for NSA when I was in the Army, Signals Intelligence. And I think about when I got out and then I went back to college in 94. Unless you're old like me and involved in using computers, I originally went to school years ago for computer programming, you realize that the internet really didn't exist when this guy was active. Even when I was working on my master's, it was all, you had to use backslashes and asterisks to create images, and there was nothing on the internet, literally. A couple of chat rooms and some games. So it was so, I used to carry, I was, in the military, $120, $100, $200 in my wallet because I didn't have an ATM debit card. I had a credit card, but I did pretty much everything by cash and didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have them. I mean, they had car phones and stuff that were the size of a briefcase. But when we talk about now living off the grid, back then we were off the grid. And it would be very easy for this guy to travel around, pay for everything with cash, and there'd be no record of it. Plus, he worked for the railroad. I worked for construction, and whenever we went somewhere, we had cash, or the company would call ahead and make the reservations and pay for it, and we didn't have to use credit cards. So that's why I was saying they need to look at the company records as to what paperwork he signed off on for inspections or whatever, because there's not going to be the typical audit trail for hotels.
Well, what I told the police, what I read online is that they went to the hotels and they looked at everybody who stayed there. But the thing is that what I read was this company he worked for, the railroad company, also owned hotels. Hello? How easy is it just to jingle-ling-a-ling, call them, hey, let's put them up in this hotel of ours, and just, right? Yeah. So there you go. That takes care of that trail of evidence.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah. We were off the grid back then because there was no grid.
Okay, so
they got to be creative.
So
they
got to
look at company records.
So get this, guys. Here's what I discovered, and I shared with Dr. G. Okay, so I'm looking at the timeline of murders. We have the beginning of the murders, which was what year, Dr. G?
Yeah, February 87 with the murder of Vicky Heath.
Okay, so guess what happens right before that, guys?
And that's the I-65 murders.
Guess what happens, guys, right before that?
Yeah.
On Tuesday, July 1st, 1986, Jenny L. Greenwell, the second wife, files for divorce in La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That's a trigger.
Yeah.
I believe that he already hated women before that, but this really tipped him off. And I'll bet you, because I can't find a picture of Jenny Greenwell, I'll bet you $1 that she's got dark brown hair. And that's the pattern. But also, so did his mother. Had dark brown hair. Okay? Yeah. Which I also think could also come from something to do with mom. It's one or the other, or both. It could be both. So, the killings began right after the divorce.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So I believe
when you look at the timeline,
it's a trigger.
I have in the spreadsheet.
Psychological
January
trigger.
70, his mother dies.
Yep.
And then in April 78, 8 years later, his first wife, dies.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wonder if that was a homicide or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets remarried, and then, so 8 years later, in 1986, his second wife files divorce on him, and shortly thereafter, the homicides start.
So get this, guys. So then I'm like, so he stopped killing at what year? 1992?
Yeah, the I-65 actually ends with his second attempted murder. It's really hard to find. He has 3 shootings. He has one homicide at one location. At the next one, he murders 2 people with a pistol, and then it goes for a while. And then there's 2 stabbings, and we kind of have a name for the one for Jane Doe 1, but Jane Doe 2 I can't find the name, and that one ends in 91. And there's some interruption in there. We talk about their careers, their killing careers being interrupted. Between the first 3 murders by shooting, he has a bunch of criminal offenses, and then he has 2 botched stabbings.
Yeah.
So there, that shows you, and they've pretty much tied him to these, that he's already realizing he needs to change his MO or he's going to get caught.
So get this, guys. So, and the I-65 and the I-70 killings timeline is perfect mesh. Yeah. It just flows beautifully, unfortunately.
Yep, they don't overlap.
Yep. Then his life events of Greenwell are also matched perfectly to his timeline. Yeah. Like I said, the divorce, July 1st, 1986, and then the killings began right after that. Then he all of a sudden stops, allegedly. And guess what occurred around that time? His father got ill and died in September 30th, 1993.
Yep.
And the last killing was in 1992.
Yep. And what's interesting,
so his father probably was sick. Life got in the way for him, just like BTK, Dennis Radar. Yeah. He stopped killing for a time, and when he got caught, they asked him, "What? Why did you stop killing?" He said, "I had a baby." So life got in the way. And I'm telling you, this killer, his life got in the way, and this life event of his father being sick and dying at the same time of when he allegedly ended his killings on the I-70 is due to his father being sick and dying.
Yep, he got sidetracked.
It matches perfectly. So, what else did we discover?
Yeah, and then and it also stops, surprisingly, at the same time that law enforcement, and this is so bizarre, I can't believe they did this, actually went public and said that they had ballistic evidence that all these homicides in 92 were connected.
The I-70 cases?
Yeah, connected ballistically with these jewelers, Red Rouge, and
so all he had to do was just change up his mojo, right? Which sparked the changing up. And we found from tracking the background I did on him, I found evidence that as I was thinking, he fled. He fled to different states. And I do have evidence that he did. Mm-hmm. Through the background I did on him and his criminal record and getting tickets, thank God to tickets, that there's a trail that he went into different states. In 1990, okay, so the last killing was in 1992, and that's when I believe his dad was sick and died in 93.
Yeah.
And then he has, in 1993, he has a traffic ticket in Wisconsin. He has 1998 in Iowa. He has in 1998 again, Iowa. He has in 1998 dismissed. Don't know the state. 2007, he's in Minnesota.
Yeah, Martin County, Fairmont.
2010, he's in, do we see, Iowa?
That's,
and then 2013,
he retires.
Oh, I see. 2010 is a retirement. I'm looking at a flow chart here. Yep. And then 2013, cause of death, lung cancer, and he dies. Mm-hmm. So I do have my evidence. He went into different states. I told the police that they, and of course they probably know, but they need to look into unsolved murders or missing person cases there in those particular states that he got his tickets.
Yeah.
or committed any other crimes that we're unaware of. And I'm telling you, this is the guy. Why? Because I knew nothing about this case, and everything the Lord showed me, which is very specific, matched up to the I-65 killer.
Yeah.
Greenwell. That he lived in Iowa. I have his address. I saw his house. It's secluded. Nothing's around. Exactly what the Lord showed me. He also showed me him growing things. The guy sold his things. He grew things, remember? He canned them and sold them at farmer's market. I said that the Lord showed me that he worked alone, isolated when he's working. He's working on the railroad alone. He's isolated. And that's how he gets away with murders.
Yeah.
He matches up completely.
Yeah, and killers evolve. They grow in their bravado. We had to really dig for this. You found this one. I didn't. Way back in 1965, when he was only 21 years old. I mean, he started out at 19 with armed robbery and got sentenced to 2 years, and he got 5 years of
as
probation.
a criminal. Mm-hmm.
But in 65, at the age of 21, he was arrested for sodomy in Kentucky and sent to prison. He was paroled in 69, so he spent 4 years there. And he gets out, and he ends up, he's got robbery, sodomy, burglary. I mean,
all in his 20s.
Possession of stolen property.
No, wait, where is he at now? 30s
traffic
or 40s?
Violations that you can imagine, driving on suspension, everything.
He's been married 3 times.
So you have a killer, the I-65, and they have tied him via DNA to these cases.
Yeah, otherwise he commits
fooling
3
everyone. Homicides, and then all of a sudden he has an affair with the criminal justice system again, law enforcement, domestic violence with his wife. We're guessing, because we can't find it, with his second wife. Took some research to actually find that he had a second wife.
I discovered that
Jenny
as well.
L. Greenwell in Wisconsin. And
we can't find pictures
he changes
of her,
his MO from a pistol to stabbing. And then there's some time off there.
Well, he also threatened
He
threatened his second wife when she divorced him, right?
Yep.
A couple of years later,
she
gets a restraining order against him. He violates it, and does he go to jail?
Yeah. Now,
did he go to jail for that?
He got probation. He got sentenced to 15 months probation for violating the restraining order.
We don't know exactly what happened there.
On April 18th.
What year?
89. And so he got smarter. If you look at the I-65 killer, those crimes were committed in the morning, the wee hours, at Days Inn and other hotels, motels. Odds are there's only going to be one person there. You have time in the back room to do whatever you'd like. And after he changes up and it goes from I-65 to I-70, all of a sudden, they're during the day. It's not like he walked into a grocery store or a bank. He walked into businesses where there's probably going to be 1 or 2 people, if there are any customers. And rape is no longer an issue, it's killing. And you even said in your profile that these were about the killing. It's about the killing.
Oh, it's always about the killing. It's not about any money. That's just a cover.
Yeah.
It's also not about, he's into violence. I was going to say about the sex, but, that's about violence. What I picked up was he's a control freak.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord showed me that over and over. Everything's about control. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the killings are about control. Sex, the rape is about control. Bluffing the family, the wife, everything's about control. He's really a control freak. Everything that he did. And, so, anyway.
Here, I'm concerned about this. September 30th, 1993, his father dies. And the next time he really, except for driving after suspension, the next time he comes in contact is arrest for felony possession of a weapon in Alamaki County, Iowa, in October of 1998. So we're talking about a 5-year spread there. And now
there's going to be other bodies.
Some might say, the guy in Texas, and they are looking at that. I-70 killer is the Texas
and
killer.
We don't believe it's connected to the I-70 killer at all.
He used a pistol, but he shot one person in
3 times
in the face, and all these other ones were
times.
Execution, gangland type execution.
Yeah,
back
I mean,
there's
head,
and
there's what she was injured 3 times or something, multiple times,
back
whatever
of the head,
it was,
neck and face,
and so that's a no. And
attempted rapes.
And number 2 is the other woman who was left paralyzed or something, had to learn how to walk all over again. That, I'm sorry, is not him. I also discount anyone testifying that he is 5'7" or so. I don't believe their testimony because they're under stress of
extreme duress.
Extreme. And they've just had a gun to their head.
And they're laying on the ground.
Yeah,
and it's not like they have the strip next to the.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The door.
The reason why I say this is because of the fact that the I-65 killer, before they had a DNA connection and solved it, I want to point out the fact that the I-65 killer, go look at the sketch, guys, looks nothing like the Greenwell. Nothing. Okay?
Yeah.
And this is an alleged witness. I saw him. This is exactly what it looks like. And he looked nothing like it. So I'm sorry. I'm not going to discount the I-70 killer based on someone saying, I'm sorry, he was younger and shorter. When you had a gun to your head and you've been on the ground and etc., emotionally distraught, no. Let's use some common sense. Someone has been doing crimes of killing people with a gun on the I-70. Well, right around the corner on the I-65, the timeline matches the same type of caliber of work, of killings. People don't just commonly go and shoot people and so brazen in the middle of where people can see you, either in a hotel or in a storefront. Do you know how brazen that is?
Yeah.
No. I'm sorry. I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. Someone allegedly witnessing. We have other witnesses to listen to as well that contradict what they say, such as the gentleman who owned the video store.
Yeah.
He said the guy had a lazy eye. Okay? Yeah. And he didn't have a gun to his head.
Eyewitnesses research consistently shows that when we talk about wrongful prosecutions and so forth, research consistently shows that eyewitness testimony is very, very inaccurate. I remember watching, you can look it up online, one case where a professor actually had, if I remember correctly, an individual in a gorilla suit come into the classroom and interact with another person. And then after the class was over, he asked the students to write down what they saw or quizzed them. I don't quite remember. But their description of what they had seen, I mean, right there in the front of the classroom, was so disparate, different from one another, and different from the truth. But other than that, research consistently shows that it is highly inaccurate. And it's so difficult. I mean, I'm a terrible judge of weight. But can you imagine you're laying on your back, being assaulted, or on your stomach, and you roll over on your back, or whatever, and look up at somebody when you're under extreme duress, and tell me what their height is.
Or even the eye color.
Those height strips, next to the door, were first used by 7-Eleven, developed in the mid-70s. And once
But
they
that also
started using,
tells
but you have a camera on that.
Yeah,
you know?
but to develop it tells you that it's difficult to figure out someone's
Yes.
height. That they had to create that to make sure we get it right.
Here's a question for you.
Right.
Here's a question for you. And I'm not talking about like ancient structures like the Fuggerei in Augsburg, Germany. I mean, I darn near had a duck to go through the doors. But can you tell me, in your country, wherever you're at, which leads me to a quick shout out here, we're in we look at our stats, we've been heard in every state of the Union and 36 countries worldwide. So here's some of them.
Over 36.
Oh, yeah. Malaysia, United Arab Emirates, Belgium, Turkey, Poland, Bangladesh, Ireland, Greece, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, and I'll give you a few more later. But that's just a taste of where we're at. So thank you for listening to us. But now think about where you're at. Can you tell me how many inches tall your doorway is to your house? If you can't tell me how tall your doorway is accurately,
without measuring
and you
it,
don't know
go
it,
cheat.
Yeah, take a guess and then go measure it and see how accurate you were. Now, if a person were to come through that door, could you tell me how tall they are and how much they weigh?
Well, first, wait. Let's put a gun to your head. Let's make you think
yeah.
you're about to die.
Lay on the floor and
Now
do
you're
this.
emotionally distraught. You don't even know where you are or feel your feet or legs anymore. Yep. And I graduated from a law enforcement academy, 2 of them. And one thing that they train us is that you get tunnel vision. Okay? Yep. When adrenaline starts going. So if you think cops go through that, now what do you think a victim's going to go through? The cop gets that when they don't even have a gun to their head.
Yeah.
How about if you're about to think you're going to die? It's going to be a lot worse, right?
Yeah. But,
so, you know what? They're not going to be able to tell you how someone tall or their eye color.
But remember, I was talking about the stats on lazy eyes and green eyes. If you might forget about the color of their eyes, which is, roughly 9% of the population at green, but a lazy eye, 3 to 4% of the population. What are the odds of getting those two wrong? You might miss the weight, you might miss the height, but everybody describes him as a white man with a lazy green eye.
If you think about it, all those witnesses have not talked to each other or read the statements.
Yeah.
And they all said lazy eyes. And not only that, but the fact that they're on the 2 different cases. The I-65 witnesses did, as well as the I-70.
Yeah.
And nobody compared notes, and they match.
Yeah.
Hello? Who has a lazy eye and who's capable of doing these things? Oh, it's Greenwell.
Yeah, and then back to the crime mapping aspect of it. The Canadian Pacific merged eventually with the Kansas City Southern route. And if you look at where all of these are, Canadian Pacific pretty much covers the I-65 murders.
That reminds me.
And the Kansas City Southern covers the east-west route on I-70.
That reminds me. This is why I believe that he first killed in Indiana, is because he's cruising, coming down the I-65 from his Iowa home. Of course, it's speculation, right? But it does make sense logically. Now let's merge on to the, I-70 around there. And then he stops over for a killing in Indiana. And then he makes his way over to, why does he go all the way over to Kansas City? I believe it's because in Kansas City is the headquarters of the railroad company.
Yeah, KSC.
Yep.
KCS.
Yep. It's the headquarters. Maybe he had like a meeting, training event or something, reporting in. And then that's why he goes back and forth to the other directions.
And
the oddball, it's odd. Well, that's business. He's doing business, right? Because he goes to the right. First he goes to Indiana, then over to Kansas City, Missouri, right?
Yeah.
Or Wichita. And then back and then back again. You know, it makes sense that he had certain appointments he needed to show up for. And along the way, his lunch hour, he's killing.
Yep, it's like I was saying before. We're off the grid because there was no grid. If you go back and look at the company I work for, Bill and Grain Bins, you will not find me spending any money anywhere because it was all cash.
And would you have to, you know what, another thing he wouldn't have to do is like do time cards, check in,
exactly.
check out.
Yeah, because we worked from sun up to sundown.
Right.
We were on our own.
The only thing he would leave a trail is hotels. But when you own the hotels and you're putting your people up in the hotels that you own, or motels, whichever the case, in which I read and found that railroad company owns motels or hotels. That's all you need to do is put your employees up for free.
Yeah. And somebody,
and that's why the detectives never found a trail.
And if he's working track maintenance or he's the inspector out finding the faults and then ordering the maintenance to come in, there's going to be a record of paperwork that he signed off on a specific location.
I don't think he needs to sign anything at the hotel.
No.
I've been a manager of law firms.
For the railroad company.
The railroad company just has to call. Hey, ding-a-ling-a-ling, call the motel. Hey, Jim Smith is coming tonight. Okay,
right.
let him stay for 3 nights.
I agree.
Yep, and you don't pay.
But they should be able to look at a piece of paper that says, at this intersection, 14 feet of track need to be replaced. Yes. And it's going to have his signature on it.
Yes.
And
but
that's
at the hotel,
going to be his trail. That's going to be his trail.
But that's why they never found hotel or motel trails. The detectives were trying to find it. They checked everyone who stayed there, and that's why they never found any. Because the railroad company owned the motels he stayed at.
So based on your prophetic and what the Lord has
I believe they're going to solve this.
You,
I believe prophetically they're going to solve this case, but unfortunately it's going to be the same as the I-65.
Same person.
Because of they're going to go. The Lord showed me they have fingerprints or partial fingerprints, or and they have DNA.
What about I-35?
So they need to run that, work with that, and they will. They'll solve this.
What about I-35?
They got this.
Some people are saying I-35 might be tied in.
I don't believe it is. I saw the guy on video kill. I don't remember the guy's last name. His name is Bobby, a victim. I watched and analyzed and with my prophetic gifts and asked the Lord, and with what I do, which is accurate, go listen to my other ones, go read my email evidence to law enforcement where I say it before it all occurs. Go on my Facebook, found as Kymmi, Kymmi, Bloomberg, BLOOMBRG. Go look at the PIN docuseries. I have email evidence on every case. Accurate to the T because it's not from me. It's from God, and God knows everything. So anyway, they will solve this. They need to work with these fingerprints that they have the DNA from the fingerprints.
Yeah.
He touched something. His fingerprints. The Lord showed me that.
Yeah. Touch DNA. We worked with that during the Smiley Face case. A couple of them.
Is that through fingerprints?
Oh, yeah. We had the guys come in, Jared and his crew, with the little vacuum cleaner, and
they need to work with
the DNA off, and yep.
Yeah, they need to just keep looking at, they need to dismiss this height thing and the age thing. I mean, they really need to go with, it's very, very, it's right before them. They've had fires, and you have fires in a different area. Well, who was doing those fires? Who's capable of that level, that caliber of evil?
Yeah.
It's really obvious. They just need to find the evidence, which is not hard. I mean, excuse me, it is hard. I know that it's easy for me to say certain things, and I understand that you need physical evidence is hard to find, and I understand that and respect that.
And we got a 5-year gap there, 93 to 98. I really hope the law enforcement can look at this, and I don't think he quit. Just like the Reno.
No, he went to different states.
I worked on.
They need to look into different states to make sure, with missing persons and other people who have been killed, to make sure it's not him.
Yeah.
Because this guy, is a career criminal for sure. Serial killer who never wanted to stop and definitely resembles Dexter.
Yeah. So we should wrap this up for you true crimers out there that are really into this. There's lots of information out there on the internet to give you exact dates, times, locations, and things like that. And you can cross-reference that with the prophetic word that Kymmi read for you. Another quick shout-out to these are some of the other countries
who are listening to us.
Listening. Thank you very much. India, Switzerland, Russia, Israel, Australia, France, Pakistan, Italy, Ukraine, and Austria.
And there's a lot more, and we thank you all for listening.
Just top of the list.
And it's amazing that you are sharing time with us.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Every continent except Antarctica is on our list.
And every American state.
Yep.
Yeah, every state in the United States, right?
You bet. So anyway, thank you for listening, and I'm Dr. G.
And I'm Rev Kymmi, and thank you so much for listening.